Right, folk. Well, I think it's probably a good time to start then. Welcome all back. Hope if you can remember that far back, you had a lovely holiday. I'm a teacher, so that's how I compartmentalize the year. So I hope you all had a lovely holiday a few weeks ago. Obviously, we're back in national lockdown. I hope you're all able to fare and cope well with that, and finding ways to keep yourself sane and safe. We've obviously kicked off this series of talks again after a bit of a break. Very excited to welcome Mark Strong, who's going to be talking to us about active transport today. If you've seen the blurb for the event, you'll know that Mark has had about 30 years experience working on transport initiatives and sustainable transport. He's worked all across the country, including places like Manchester, Derby, Brighton. And as we just heard from Kerry, gets a full thumbs up and a great round of applause from the Cambridge Cycle Campaign. So there's not much more for me to say. I'm going to pass over to Mark. Thank you very much for joining us, and look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Just check I've got my screen share going. How's that? Can everyone see that? Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I just want to say, it wouldn't have been, none of this would have been possible without Cambridge, because as many people, I was a student at Cambridge and I learnt to ride a bike on the Sidgwick site. So without doing that, I wouldn't have actually, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. I was doing something completely different. But it is all down to being a cyclist in Cambridge more than 30 years ago. So really, it's always good to sort of feel like I'm coming back and helping with that side of things. And at some point I can talk about my crashes, but that's another story. Anyway, so yeah, I'm working as a transport consultant for transport initiatives, and we're working on sustainable transport projects, particularly cycling across the country. In Brighton, I'm more of an activist because it's too difficult to get stuff local. I'm a member of local Green Party in Brighton, which, as you may know, is the administration. So it's quite challenging times. So what I've done is a talk basically half on the problems, and I'm sure you know them all, so please apologize, apologies if I'm teaching you things that you already know very well, and then about half on some solutions and some answers. And it does seem like a bit like Coles to Newcastle when we were talking about things like active travel in Cambridge, obviously with the largest level of cycling in the UK. But this is the problem. I don't need to remind people that this is what we've got. This is obviously pre-lockdown, but this is the situation on the M25. And if Heathrow got expanded, this is near Heathrow, it would be even worse. And there isn't really an appetite amongst a lot of people to try and change this. But the problem being that transport is a huge proportion of the CO2 production. And it's been, here so you can see, it's been bumbling along at the same level for the last 30 years. And lots of other sectors have all dropped, reduced their emissions. Transport has actually gone up in the last 5 or 7 years. So transport is the real problem to trying to reduce CO2 emissions. And if you look locally, it's really focused on driving. I mean, that's really where the problems come. The larger growth of SUVs and larger cars are all problematic. And if you look at the sectors in transport that is emitting emissions, it really is private cars. There are other sectors, and this is obviously pre-lockdown. It's probably much higher now with light goods vehicles and lots of home deliveries going on. But this sector is quite big. But passenger cars and local journeys made by local people doing short trips are by far and away the biggest sector, and it's the most challenging sector to address. But there are all sorts of other problems, of course, with the growth and the increase of use of private cars. All these things, I'm not expecting everyone to read this in detail, but all these issues are hugely important. And the three things that are really quite crucial is wider air quality. So there's not just CO2, but air quality. And there has been links shown to COVID, both in people now having poor air quality if they're catching COVID and having lung problems, but also historically areas that have had poor air quality for a long time are seeing higher levels of infection because people's lungs have been damaged. But generally, health and inactivity is a real problem, as we know, and obviously with the Prime Minister getting told off for doing something perfectly reasonable in a strange sort of way. This is the one thing he's doing that is okay, is going for a short bike ride. Yet people see that as weird. And also, of course, cycling is seen as something that's dangerous for other people, whereas we know, this is a report done by the Parliamentary Advisory Committee on Transport Safety Pacts. They did a really good report about what kills most, and they showed what vehicles are most dangerous to other road users. So there's a whole host of other implications from large numbers of road vehicles. And there is, electric cars are often seen as the answer, but most cars are stationary most of the time, and that wouldn't be any different for an electric car. Most cars are short, and 24% of households don't have a car. And I looked at the Cambridge figures. Brighton's slightly higher. Brighton's 48% doesn't have a car. It's 33% in Cambridge, so a third of households don't have a car. And even the households that have a car, many of those will have one car. So one person in that household will have access to the car, and 2, 3, or 4 other people in the household won't be able to use it. And the other problem is there's a big focus on commuting trips, on work trips. That's partly because the census, which measures these things, is focusing on work trips. But if you look at it, it's only about a sixth to a fifth of trips are commuting. And all these other issues, and again, this is in normal times, but all these other issues are other reasons for trips aren't really addressed by the focus on work. So really, we need to try and change the perspective and change the angle on moving away from card-borne work trips as the focus of what we're trying to address, and look at the wider picture. So why focus on walking and cycling? These are the government's own figures. This is in fact from the Cycling and Walking Investment Strategy a few years ago. And the focus was that most trips can be walked or cycled in urban areas. So okay, you've got 25% of work trips in Cambridge made by bike, but actually 80% could be walked or cycled. So yes, you're doing really, really well, but on the other hand, there's still more potential that could be put in there. I won't go through all these figures, but they're all being recorded, so you can look at it again. And as I said, it's all on the government's website. There's all sorts of other benefits from cycling. These are TfL's figures. Cycling increases spend in local high streets, local neighbourhood parades, which are even more important now, actually, than they were before. Not everyone wants to go to a crowded supermarket to do their shopping. They want to go to the local shopping parade, and somewhere like Hills Road, for example. It's the sort of Mill Road, sorry, it's the sort of place people want to go to. So these are the sort of things people make lots of short trips rather than doing longer, bigger trips. The health benefits, we've said, are all very large, and it's also good for businesses. So if you look at businesses using cycle freight, and I know you've got Outspoken in Cambridge doing some really good stuff with cycle freight. So again, you're ahead of the curve on so much of this. So there's really a way forward, and it's really difficult sometimes to wonder. You can put all this evidence through, and it often falls on deaf ears. But at least we've got one level of support, and that's, strangely enough, for many people, is actually the government. And this is something they've pushed immensely during the last 9 months, last year. So in May, they announced 2 billion, not enough, but much more than the amount that was promised pre-election, which is something like 300 million over 5 years. And then in July, the gear change document, which is the government's strategy for cycling and walking, with a forward by the Prime Minister, was published. And simultaneously, cycling infrastructure design, which I was helping to, I was on the peer group review for that. And that's looking at the detailed design of cycle infrastructure. And then more recently, what was originally the Emergency Active Travel Fund, then the Active Travel Fund was announced, with large amounts of funding. With variable results, and I'm sure you've got the same issues locally, with some schemes going in a hurry, not necessarily welcomed, other schemes being put off, and a small amount for bike repairs. And what's not really appreciated is the huge level of public support there is for this. So this over here is from the DFT's own opinion polls, and they looked at whether people supported it, and they found 77% of people supported traffic reduction, active travel priority. But what they also found, and 78% of the local area, what I haven't got here, is the figures when they're asked, do you think your neighbours support this? And by and large, most people thought, yes, I support it, but my neighbours don't. Everyone thought they were in a minority, even though they're in a majority. This is from a study done for a group called Bike is Best, and they found that 6.5% people agreed that they wanted to see improvements to walking and cycling, to everyone that didn't. So again, there's a huge amount of support out there, but there's also a lot of people who are very quiet on it. So you've got people who want to see change, got a lot of very noisy people who don't want to see change, and something like 80% of the public in the middle. It's not the most important things in their life, and in a sense, why should it be? There's a lot more important things going on: COVID, jobs, general health, education. All these issues are far more important for most people than how they get around, and that's completely reasonable. But when you ask those people, when you press them a bit harder, you find that they do support this. It's just not top of their agenda. And one of the other problems is businesses. This is from Waltham Forest and Lea Bridge Road, where the Mini Holland project has been really successful. And if you look at what businesses think their customers want, they think the customers want better parking all the time. And if you look at what the actual people who shop at these shops want, they don't want better parking. It's not really in, some of them will do, no doubt, but it's not in their top priority. The top priority is less traffic and better crossings. So it's really at odds, and this is, Sustrans did a similar piece of research in Bristol a few years ago. It's really this mismatch between what businesses think and therefore what business voices think and what people actually want is quite striking. So just, I mentioned earlier about Brighton's Climate Assembly. I won't go into details, but it was published literally yesterday. And some really interesting ideas here about what they want. And these are 50 people drawn from the general public who've been gone through a sort of education process with some experts talking to them. And the number one thing they want out of that is a car-free city centre. These are not campaigners. These are those normal people that I mentioned. And this is what they've come up with, a whole 10 series of recommendations they want to see. So just going quickly back to the Active Travel Fund, it's been very patchy across the country. Some councils got more than they asked for, some got less. Cambridgeshire, actually looking at it, got I think, am I looking at Cambridgeshire over here? This is Cambridgeshire, isn't it? The Greater Cambridge Partnership area got 75% of what was asked for, so that's the area you're in. So actually the money that you could have had for cycling and walking is less than the government was originally going to offer to you. So somebody either didn't make their bid very well or didn't make the case very well. So moving on quickly to some details about what can be done. And I'll talk about the top ones very briefly, not the bottom, because there just isn't time to go into it. So there are various ways of trying to deal with it. One is the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, which is the government's aim to have a document which brings everything together. And I can't remember, but I'm not sure that there is actually a document for Cambridgeshire. I may be wrong, but I can't remember seeing one, and I think I would probably have seen it. So that's an overarching document that brings it all the ideas together. Low traffic neighbourhoods, I'll mention in a minute, school streets, and so on. This is one of the schemes that went in near me in Shoreham. Some of you might have seen it. It's actually literally being taken out today, despite it being really popular, really well used. As I said, those small number of voices that were against it have managed to persuade one politician to take it out against lots of other people's views. It's very disappointing. One of the key things in gear change is this overarching idea of design principles. And some of the problems we've had with cycle infrastructure recently is it's been really poorly designed, not very well detailed. And these simple measures of trying to say that, the people who design routes should be people who use them or should know what it's like to experience the routes. Sure, it's very simple, but it's never really been properly said, excuse me, in a detailed way before. So just quickly moving on, proper routes on proper main roads. Some of you might spot the Cambridge photo in there, which is Huntingdon Road in there. Excuse me, we did a study, my consultancy did a study outside up near Girton of the parallel crossing there. But the embankment cycle route, which actually is one of the premier routes in the country, and various routes in other parts of the country. So main high quality routes on key strategic corridors. And then junctions, again, some of you will spot the Cambridge photo in there. Fenton Road, which I know has been controversial, but it's not necessarily the right thing in every place, but it certainly seems to have improved the conditions at that junction. And this is the Cyclops junction in Manchester. I didn't manage to find one with people in it, but this is a signalised high quality version. So when you've got important junctions, dealing with them properly. Low traffic neighbourhoods is the other end of the spectrum, really. It's about doing local things in local streets. Lambeth are really good because they've done these really, rather than being professional drawn diagrams, they've done these really people-friendly diagrams for what they've been doing. And this is back to Waltham Forest. This is Orford Road. And this is what it looked like. And genuinely, this is the same street. This is what it looked like originally. This is what it looks like now. And it had, at the time, a huge amount of opposition, people marching coffins through the streets and so on. And now you'd find it very difficult to find anyone locally who said they opposed it, including the people who did oppose it in the first place. And then modal filters, road closures, the outside the Bank of England, the Mansion House. This one, I can't remember, somewhere in London, Lambeth. This car going through here is going to be photographed, which you can do in London, you can't do in Cambridge, you can't do anywhere else in the country. This is my son's former primary school, which is now a school street. And this is Brighton, the seafront, which was the first road closure for COVID in the country. It's sadly now been taken out for a variety of reasons, but it will go back better, hopefully soon. So finally, I'll just end up with, you're a long way from the sea, and some of you might not have seen the sea for 9 months. So I thought I'd show you a photograph of the seaside in nicer pictures. This is the pop-up lane that we put in one way. So we've now got one way where that was a two-way track, and one way. So we've now got 2 ways, doubling the width. And this literally was on Christmas Day. So we had a nice morning on Christmas Day, and I spotted these cargo bikes. So you can see we're maybe not as many as you have, but we do have them down there, and people do go down to the sea and enjoy it. So thanks for the presentation, and I'm sure you'll have lots of questions.
Don't know why you're thanking us, Mark. Thank you. That was
thanks for the opportunity.
Okay, that was a very informative presentation. There was one thing I wanted to just pick up on before I throw it up to more general questions. There seems to be a slight contradiction with the public opinion aspect of this, because people are saying in these polls, very supportive, let's do measures to improve cycling and walking infrastructure as a priority. And then, as you said, when it happens, people are out with their coffins in the streets to protest it. Here in Cambridge, the Cambridge Cycle Campaign was quite effective at the beginning of lockdown, and one of the things was closing the Mill Road Bridge, and it caused a huge uproar. Despite the fact there seems in Cambridge, on paper, a lot of support for improving cycling infrastructure. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on what people are saying they want, and then how people are actually reacting when these changes are brought about.
Well, I think there's 2 things there. One is that it's about confidence. So if authorities' leadership dithers, then people pick up on that dithering. But the point that's come from Grant Shapps, and it's very strange to start praising people like Grant Shapps, but he said you've got to cut through the noise and ignore those people who are shouting, because they are a small proportion. So if you show leadership and you essentially stick to your guns, you listen to people, but you make it very clear that what they're saying is about the detail and not about the principle. And you say, we've established the principle of reducing traffic, closing, making local streets or whatever. And yes, there are details. So this is what the Green Party did in Brighton. There were concerns about disabled people. What that closure was taken out because disabled, there's a changing places toilet there, which is for really severely disabled people. And people with blue badges weren't able to get in and use that toilet. So that's why it was changed. So changing some of the details, but not going back on the whole principle, is about, that's the way forward. But you've got to be quite clear about it. As I said, 80% of people are not really fussed one with the other, and they'll go with the flow. And one of the things, if you like, about the British psyche is that we tend to go with, we don't want to be seen as standing out. So if the flow appears to be negative, a lot of people say, oh, well, if that many people are moaning about it, there must be a problem with it. So the important thing is to set the leadership. And if you look at what Chris Boardman and Andy Burnham have been doing in Manchester, that's exactly what they've been doing, is setting their very clear role model of, this is what we're doing it for these reasons. You've said we want us to do these reasons. We're quite happy to discuss the detail. We're not going to change on the principles. And I think that's the problem, is you need that strong leadership, and often you don't get it. Where it does come, by the way, if you look at Waltham Forest, well, you talked about people in the street. Clyde Lokes, who was the deputy leader of Waltham Forest, and he tells the story about how he was well prepared. He had his speech written for how he was going to lose the election, because he was the cabinet member who's leading it all, and his majority went up, not down. So, when it does come to, the democratic voice, it's it doesn't really swing people's votes at the end of that process.
That's, I love that answer. It's got me pumped up and ready to get my action on. I have a question here from Hannah, which is, how do you think that the Green Party should approach the car lobby when they oppose low traffic neighbourhoods?
I think it's to talk about the principles. It's to talk about, most people want, it's a bit motherhood and apple pie, if I can use that phrase. It's a very American phrase, but it is talking about why you're doing things and not focusing on the details, and sort of saying, maybe not going as far as when Kensington Chelsea was opposing the cycle. It took out the cycle lane in Kensington Chelsea, and people were going on sort of calling it the Royal Borough of killing children, which is maybe taking it a bit far. But basically saying, so these are the things you're not in favour of, and just sticking to the broader principles, not the detail, because they will continue to go back on. They'll pick they'll always keep picking the exceptions. Oh, what about the poor disabled person who can't get to the shops? It's important to pick up the broader picture. There will always be, problems. There will always be individual problems, but it's trying to pick off the bigger picture and not falling for the individual trolls, I suppose.
Well put, very well put. I'm going to pass the mic to Kerry, because Kerry would like to ask you a question on pollution.
Hi. In Trumpington, we have a lot of problem with asthma and hay fever, and generally the general feeling about it is that it's to do with crops. But we're also only a mile from the motorway, and there's a lot of very heavy traffic on the motorway, even though it's very quiet at the moment in Cambridge. And we've all been a lot of us have been suffering recently, and I wondered what research had been done about pollution and agriculture, if you come across anything.
I'm not an air quality specialist, but I know somebody who is. I would just say that when I was a student, I used to walk out to the bridge over the M11 to just look at the traffic. Strange things in those days, so I do know it very well, because I was in Memorial Court at Clare. But my friend Gary Fuller, who's written a book called Air Quality, the Hidden Killer. And I'm sure there's something in there about agriculture. He's a researcher. I think he's just moved. He was at King's College. I think he's now at Imperial. But if you look up his research, it will have Gary Fuller, Fuller. He's on Twitter. And his answer to most things, actually, is go and buy my book. When you ask him direct questions saying, is agriculture a problem? He said, yes, it's in my book, chapter 3. And it's a very well written, actually quite an easy, it's not an academic book, although it is, on a technical subject. But I'm sure I remember reading things in there about some of the research being about, and the methodology for researching air quality being about the implications of agriculture and air plumes coming over from the continent in particular.
Yeah.
And I know there are certain problems in places in sort of Northern Europe which are to do with that issue as well. But I think one of the problems is that things interact with everything else. So, I've got the South Downs behind me, and if you measure nitrogen oxides on the South Downs, it looks lovely, but actually it's really quite high because plumes come over from France and land on Sussex. So, some things are very localized and some things come from quite a long way away. So particulates obviously don't travel very far because they're heavy and they fall off quite, if they fall down next to a road quite quickly. But obviously gases travel further. So, without giving I wouldn't want to give a scientific answer because that's not my area. But I think you're quite right, and it is an issue. And also things like burning crop stubbles and all that sort of issue, all have an impact as well. And I have hay fever, and I do. I found actually I get more hay fever in Brighton than I did in London. So maybe it's some particular type of pollen.
So how would you see us reducing heavy lorries on the motorway?
Well, I think that the freight is always a Cinderella. It's been a Cinderella issue generally amongst everyone. And I think getting freight onto two things, onto rail, and possibly on waterways, if you can do that, has got to be the way forward. And obviously trying to, first thing is about trying to reduce the amount of consumable goods, and we're doing a great job with that with Brexit anyway. So we're reducing, we're just trying to reduce what is going around anyway. So who knows what will happen with that? But I think trying to do that and trying to get nearer things sourced nearer to home is obviously an important factor. But then when you look at freight locally, and I talked about micro logistics and last mile delivery and so on, and trying, there's no reason why, if everything is shipped in a large 40-foot lorry, why that 40-foot lorry has to then come into the city centre as the 40-foot lorry and park. We have an issue right in the middle of Brighton with a small mini Tesco's, and everything gets delivered by HGVs, which has, not just the air quality, but the road traffic, road casualty problems, and the road surface is being broken up by it. So there are so many issues that freight is, can affect, and I said it tends to get forgotten about. But I think trying to get stuff onto rail has got to be the primary one, which is why I'm a bit concerned, by the way, about the Green Party position on HS2. I'm much more equivocal than it's awful. It's not great, but it's not awful either, in my perspective.
Yeah. How do you think we get it on the agenda? Freight.
What, nationally or locally? I think
Nationally.
I think nationally, I think it is about trying to point out that that the implications that this rise, particularly the rise locally, is now about Amazon deliveries or whatever. It's a real local issue as well as a national issue, and I think that's the way to push it, is to say that why we've got huge lorries, and now seriously about Brexit, we've got lorries going empty all over the place, because when you send a lorry in one direction to deliver stuff, unless you're very well organized, it comes back the other way empty. So you've got double the handling, and that costs, quite apart from the environmental costs, that's not a benefit for the operator, because they're running around paying a driver, paying that fresh air to be transported around. So better IT to try and get things used in another direction. And the problem with that, of course, means that whoever runs that company has got to be more amenable to taking somebody else's freight in a different direction, which is organizationally can be a challenge.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to kind of merge two themes and questions that have come through the chat, because I've slightly lost track.
I can see the chat, see it myself.
There's a question about testing for road users, and question about laws regarding cyclists, and I'm just wondering, cycling proficiency was optional when I was a kid. I don't actually know what the situation is now, but what are your thoughts about doing cycling proficiency education at primary schools?
Well, my colleague Ken Spence was actually one of the authors of Bikeability. So what's replaced cycling proficiency about 20 years ago now, actually, is Bikeability, and that's the same criteria, same curriculum for adults and children. So level 1 is not falling off. Level 2 is inexperienced, if you like. Level 3 is coping with major traffic, and it's a life skill. Whether it's a tested life skill, as in you have to pass or fail, which is sort of what cycling proficiency used to do, or whether it's something you get, it's an informative life skill. People get taught to swim at school, and actually, from a life skill point of view, being taught to cycle is probably much more useful than swimming. I mean, swimming's great, but you could say, if you can teach people to do that. And in the Netherlands, even in the Netherlands, they teach people to ride a bike. Maybe it's different in Cambridge, but in most other places in the country, you haven't got a family tradition of cycling. So it's very hard for children to pick it up from their parents. So if it's done through a school system, it's a way of getting it through. So it's not just about training, it's about education and about giving a skill to children which they wouldn't otherwise gain from, there's role models as well, that you've got role models of people cycling who aren't seen, they may have their parents saying what an idiot that person is cycling. So it's a good way of doing it. So to try and get it in there is really important, but it's nowhere near an excuse or for not doing anything on infrastructure. And I think a lot of the more if you like, hardcore cycle campaigners sometimes see training and bikeability as a problem, and that's mainly because it's often used as an excuse to, you know, oh, we're doing lots of training, we don't need to put any new cycle routes. And it's very much something that comes after you put in cycle routes, not the other way around, and it's not an excuse to not do anything. But go and look at bikeability. You know, strongly suggest, and even like long-term experienced cyclists, I did my bikeability level 3 training, and I found out that my right turn indicator, which was, you probably can't see my hand, which is just a wave, vague wave, and really instead of a proper sticking my arm out right, so everyone can pick up something.